Raymond Cole stood beneath the dim glow of his porch light, the quiet hum of cicadas weaving through the night air like a lullaby. His fingers brushed the faulty sensor atop the garage, flicking it back to life with a soft click. Summer in Cedar Falls had a way of settling into bone with its humidity, so even at this hour, the air clung to his skin. In the stillness, he felt the peace he'd worked so many years to build, the kind that only arrives when the chores are done. The world is asleep, and the mind finally lets the noise slip away. Inside, his daughter Maya sat curled under a soft blue blanket in the living room, one hand resting on an open notebook filled with the looping cursive of her Spelman application essay. She'd rewritten the final paragraph again, late into the evening, chasing words that sounded honest enough to tell the truth of who she was becoming. He had watched her from the kitchen doorway, smiled when she read him a line about dreams too big for a small Georgia town, and said, "Baby girl, they're not ready for someone like you yet." She'd grinned and rolled her eyes with that teenager's half-smile of self-aware exasperation. Even her sarcasm carried pride. Then she planted a kiss on his cheek and staggered up the stairs, humming a new tune still fresh with possibility. Raymond remained standing there, listening as the note curled through the walls, finally allowed himself to lean into the porch chair. A gentle breeze stirred the honeysuckle on the fence, tugging at a memory of Saturday mornings when Maya made grilled cheese sandwiches and lemonade for the two of them. He reached into his pocket and thumbed the letter peeking from the envelope he found on the coffee table. A letter from Spelman, heavy with promise, still unopened. He shook his head slightly, as if to say he wasn't ready for triumph tonight, not while her hand still lay on that page, her future trembling into words. Then it happened. The night fractured. Floodlights ripped through the windows with a thunderous rush. A voice, mechanical, distant, crackled through a bullhorn, distorted into something he couldn't bear to understand. Then came the sound of boots, heavy and synchronized, slamming down onto the porch like they'd been marching toward war. Raymond stood, heart pounding, moving before he could think. "Maya, stay in your room," he called, voice echoing into the dark. His body moved him toward the door, and he heard the telltale crack of it bursting inward, the splintering wood carrying more finality than any scream. Inside the house, Maya stood at the top of the stairs, book clutched in her hand, blanket draped over her shoulders. Her eyes were half-lidded with confusion, and then widened when the shadows advanced. He reached for her, stepping between her trembling frame and the rifles, raising his voice. "You've got the wrong house! She's just a kid!" Everything moved in fast, harsh jerks. Flashlights blinded him. A knee slammed into his back, crushing air from his lungs. Pain bloomed. He heard Maya's scream, the word "daddy" stretched out like a prayer. Raymond twisted, gasping, to see her standing at the foot of the stairs, small and bright in the chaos. She tried to raise her hands, book sliding toward the floor, but the shot came, singularly deafening, tearing through stillness. Then another. Then another. Time paused, her body folded by the stairs. The book hit the floor first. He reached out but remained pinned by sound, by shock. The room fell silent, and for one heartbeat, the world held its breath around him. Then everything recoiled. Voices filled the room with commands. Hands grabbed him. He was yanked upright and pressed to the wall, his head spinning in pain and disbelief. He thought he might scream, tried to, but his mind refused. All he could do was watch, listen to the warm trickle of red spreading across the hardwood like ink, see the way one officer nudged her with a rifle, as if trying to confirm she lay still. After that, they left. Their voices left hanging in the hallway. No apology, no looking back. Raymond slid to the floor. He didn't cry. He just stared. His letter, Maya's letter, lay on the coffee table where he left it. Dust motes swirled in the shafts of light, all so ordinary, all so ruined. Later, he heard the coroner zipper the body bag closed in another room. He sat on the couch, wrists sticky with something he refused to name, the room gazing at him in muted shapes. Across from him the envelope sat. soft cream, embossed seal promising a future that was gone. Outside, the crickets began their song again. But inside, the silence pressed against him, an accusation. When the sun rose, pale and predictable, the police tape was gone. The house smelled like bleach and lemon oil, their attempt to erase something only death could stain. The TV announced the death as tragic but isolated. The anchor's voice sounded like it was selling distance. "No charges will be filed," she said, as though this declaration had weight. A mistake had been made. End of story. Raymond didn't reply. He flipped off the screen. The letter sat on the coffee table, untouched. He stared at the spot where Maya's blood had dried. The wood glowed under morning light, indifferent. It was a wound that would never close. Later, a city official arrived. A man in mirrored sunglasses, pressed uniform, teleprompter tone. He handed him a sealed envelope labeled Formal Statement, offered a check for funeral costs, and said, "We're truly sorry for your loss." Raymond took the envelope, nodded, closed the door. He let the weight of their silence settle like ash in his lungs. He carried Maya's photo to the mantel, thumb brushing the edge of her unguarded smile, and whispered, "I'm so sorry." In that whisper, he exhaled more than breath. It was all he had left. He buried her Wednesday, under a sky so still it felt like the clouds themselves were paying respects. He wore a navy suit, one she made him promise to wear. No tie, black ribbon. He watched people drift away after the service. Teachers, classmates, neighbors, strangers. Words echoed from the pastor about hope and healing, offering comfort to a grief that no words could hold. A representative of the mayor stood at the podium, scripted sympathy in his voice. Raymond didn't move. His grief had become something solid inside, wider than tears. He knelt by her grave when they were gone, fingertips brushing the grass. "I should have protected you," he said. "I should have stopped them." That night, he sat in the dark, photo album on his lap, turning pages filled with snapshots. First day of preschool, her birthday, her arms wide across a windy back porch. Then the doorbell rang. Henry stood there with a casserole dish in foil. Raymond let him in. They sat quietly. Henry offered words. Raymond nodded. The world had offered only thin apologies before. This was something different. Later, he returned to the garage, grime under his nails, tools still scattered, the battered welding gloves hanging where he left them months ago. He took them down, feeling their weight, the worn shape molded to his fingers. No thought, only a current pulling him forward. He stood there with the memory of her laugh, untamed, warm, impossible to miss. He flipped the switch on the overhead lamp. Shadows trembled. Behind him, a siren wailed. He didn't turn. He knew what it meant. The world was still driving, still living. But he was gone from it. Not yet visible, but gone. And in that moment, grief ceased to be a wound. It became a shaping thing, a quiet decision pressing forward through a storm. A man who had nothing left but what he refused to stop holding. The scent of bleach hung thick in the hallway, clawing into the baseboards and paint like it was trying to erase something more than blood. Raymond Cole sat in the kitchen, motionless, as the sun pushed through the blinds in thin, harsh slats. Outside, the hum of a garbage truck groaned its way down Maple Street, collecting last week's discards. Inside, time didn't move. They had cleaned everything, or tried to. The couch had been moved back, the picture frames dusted, a fresh bulb in the porch light. But nothing touched the spot near the stairs where Maya fell. He could still see the exact shape her body made, how her arm curled under her like she'd just dropped to sleep. He hadn't touched the envelope from Spellman. It still sat unopened on the coffee table, right beside the check the city had sent. Compensation, they called it. Words meant to tidy grief into legal formality. He hadn't opened that either. Just held it for a moment, its corners stiff and precise, before setting it down next to Maya's photo. They looked wrong beside each other, like a celebration and a coffin on the same table. The television was on low. A news anchor in a Navy suit and perfect hair announced the conclusion of an internal review. "A tragic error," the city spokesperson had said. "No charges will be filed." The phrase was repeated, polished like a stone, meant to smooth over everything. Raymond stood and walked to the set. He clicked it off, not out of anger. There was no room left for anger, just vacancy, like someone had hollowed him out and filled him with silence. He looked down at the check, $8,000. Funeral cost plus goodwill. He picked it up, held it in his palm, then let it fall into the trash can with a dull, ugly thud. Later that afternoon, someone knocked on the door. 3 sharp taps, the kind that weren't friendly. He didn't answer right away, just stared at the door as if daring it to go away. Then came a voice he knew. "It's me," Henry said. Raymond opened the door. Henry held a foil-covered dish and a bottle of sweet tea. His face was lined with a weariness that came from knowing too much and having no words that helped. He stepped in slowly, like he didn't want to disturb something sacred. "Didn't know what else to do," Henry said quietly. "So I cooked." Raymond didn't speak. He motioned toward the table, and they sat. The casserole steamed between them. Neither reached for it. After a long pause, Henry cleared his throat. "Maya was. She was light, man. That kind of light people remember." Raymond nodded once, but didn't lift his head. "I saw the news," Henry said, eyes down. "I don't know how you're still standing." "I'm not," Raymond said, voice dry. "I just haven't fallen yet." They sat in silence. It wasn't awkward, just heavy. Henry eventually reached for a fork, took a small bite, chewed slowly. "You know, we used to talk about what we'd do if the world fell apart," he said, trying for a thread of nostalgia. "Back at the base, all those late nights." "I remember," Raymond said. "You always said you'd go quiet, disappear, fix things in the dark." Raymond didn't answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photo. Maya on her 10th birthday, missing front teeth, frosting on her cheek. He stared at it for a long while. Henry looked down at the table, then back at Raymond. "You thinking about something?" Raymond didn't reply. That night, when the house was still, he returned to the garage. The air smelled of oil and old rubber, the scent of time and labor. He turned on the workbench light. The shadows bent around the corners of old tools, forgotten projects. He reached for the welding gloves, slipped them on. The leather cracked at the creases, molded perfectly to his hands. He looked at the far wall. It was bare except for a few dusty hooks and an old bulletin board once used for maintenance schedules. Slowly, methodically, he pinned Maya's photo in the center. Then he stepped back, looked at it, as if waiting for her to speak. Next came the notebook. He pulled it from an old Army-issued duffel bag under the bench. The first page was blank. The second had a name written in clean, careful script. Sean Dorsey. Raymond exhaled. No anger, no fire, just decision. He flipped through the notebook, each page bearing a name, a date, a role. Research gathered in silence. Days spent at the library, public records, cross-checking badge numbers and body cam reports, all the pieces of a puzzle no one had tried to solve, because the conclusion was inconvenient. He returned to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, stood in the doorway between rooms. The light from the hallway pooled across the hardwood floor. From this angle, he could still see the slight discoloration where the stain refused to lift. He whispered her name. Maya. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't a prayer. It was a vow. Outside, the town carried on. A neighbor's porch light blinked. A couple laughed too loudly 3 houses down. A delivery truck hissed past. Inside, Raymond sat back at the table. He opened a drawer and pulled out a small black box, the kind that held military pins and medals. Inside was a chip from his old work in the Air Force, encrypted systems module. He turned it over in his hand, smiled faintly. The silence had offered him nothing. Now it would offer something back. The liquor store parking lot was almost empty at 4:13 a.m. A few beer cans clinked along the curb, pushed gently by the warm southern wind. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked once, then fell quiet again. Raymond Cole stood beneath a flickering street lamp, hands deep in the pockets of a gray hoodie that made him look younger, anonymous. The hoodie was borrowed, the car stolen, left running in an alley 4 blocks away. Nothing about this morning belonged to him, except the mission. Across the lot sat a dark blue Ford Interceptor, unmarked but unmistakable. Officer Sean Dorsey's personal cruiser, parked crooked, as if entitlement extended to asphalt lines, too. The man inside was asleep, head tilted back, mouth open slightly. A half-eaten fast food bag lay crumpled in the passenger seat. Raymond moved without sound. His steps were measured, precise. Every inch of his approach was rehearsed, mapped, tested. He had spent the last 3 weeks trailing Dorsey's route, his habits, even the time he bought his cigarettes. He'd learned that Dorsey took his breaks at the same liquor store just off Highway 9 every other Wednesday, always around 4 a.m., always stayed 20 minutes, always napped in the car. Beneath the cruiser, near the rear axle, Raymond slipped the device into place. A small square-shaped box painted matte black, no bigger than a deck of cards. Military-grade casing, home-engineered core. It wasn't meant to kill. That part was important. It was meant to shake. He stepped back into the shadows, clicked a small remote, and waited. 10 seconds, 20. Then the car jolted. A deep, bassy boom rocked the parking lot. The back end of the cruiser lifted slightly before settling with a hard slam onto the pavement. The windows remained intact. No fire, just smoke and noise. Enough to wake Dorsey in a blind panic. He scrambled out, gun half drawn, eyes wide and scanning. He looked like a man trying to figure out if he was already dead. On the windshield, duct-taped in place, was a folded sheet of paper. Dorsey snatched it, hands shaking. 6 words. Wrong house. Wrong girl. Your turn. Raymond was already gone. By sunrise, the Cedar Falls Police Department was crawling with noise. Dorsey had radioed it in, voice cracked with adrenaline. Bomb squad, feds, press, all swirling around something that technically wasn't even a crime. No one hurt, no fingerprints, no surveillance footage. The cameras at the liquor store had mysteriously failed, sometime around 3:58 a.m. Someone had pulled the breaker down the street. It looked professional, clean. Inside the department, murmurs began. Someone was targeting police. A cop car bombed while an officer slept inside. They whispered terrorist before anyone had facts. But facts weren't necessary. The fear was already working. Raymond sat in a rented motel room on the edge of Atlanta, hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup of burnt coffee. The news played quietly on the TV. He watched Dorsey's car on the screen, watched the talking heads guess and speculate and dramatize. The headline read, "Cop targeted in apparent retaliation." Not "Man whose daughter was killed speaks." Not "No charges filed." No mention of Maya. That part was intentional. He reached into the duffel bag beside the bed and pulled out the notebook. Flipped to the first page. Dorsey. Shook, not shattered. He drew a clean red line through the name, then flipped to the next. Raymond closed the notebook and stared at the motel ceiling. The pattern in the plaster looked like spider webs under moonlight. He thought of Maya's bedroom ceiling, the glow-in-the-dark stars she never took down, even at 17. He lit a match, held it close to his fingertip until it burned low. The pain was sharp, fast, but real. The smell brought back the garage, the torch, the years of fixing things. His whole life had been about fixing. Machines, systems, leaks, errors. But nothing had prepared him to fix a bullet in a girl's spine. He flicked the match into the sink. It hissed and died. Elsewhere, the department tried to spin it. They called it an isolated incident. They said Officer Dorsey was fine and recovering. But in the locker room, the men didn't meet each other's eyes. They knew what it meant to be watched, hunted. They knew the cold fear of guilt that hadn't been named yet. Later that night, A second note arrived on Mercer's desk. No envelope, just placed carefully atop her files. She had dreams. "Do you remember her name?" Mercer stared at it. No signature, no prints. But she knew. She didn't say it aloud, but she knew. And the weight of the knowing pressed into her chest like something permanent. Raymond drove through back roads that night, avoided highways, no GPS, no phones, just old maps, paper thin and creased with time. He stopped by a rest area an hour past midnight, walked out to a picnic table under a floodlight that buzzed with insects. He unfolded Maya's essay, the one she'd been writing that night. It wasn't finished, but it didn't need to be. "I want to study the way systems work," she had written. "How things connect and break. How justice is supposed to be a circuit, not a line, a loop where cause and consequence meet again." He folded it gently, slipped it back into the folder. She had wanted to fix things too. He whispered, "I'm trying, baby." Then he opened the notebook again. Next name, Dennis Caldwell. Time to keep going. The garage door was unlocked. That, more than anything else, told Diane Mercer she was exactly where she shouldn't be. She stepped inside quietly, pulling the door shut behind her, careful not to make a sound. The air inside was cool and stale, laced with oil, old rubber, and something else, something that didn't belong in a space meant for fixing things. It smelled like memory, like grief that had settled into the walls. She stood for a moment, letting her eyes adjust. A single bare bulb hung over the workbench, casting long, soft shadows. The space was meticulously ordered, nothing cluttered, everything in its place. Not the kind of chaos she usually associated with men in pain. Diane walked slowly, scanning the walls. At first it looked like any other garage. Pegboards lined with tools, a rusted red toolbox, an old workbench with soldering wire coiled beside a burned-out magnifying lens. But then she saw the board. It was pinned neatly across from the bench, about 5 feet wide, maybe 4 high, covered in clipped newspaper articles, driver's license photos, printed maps, and hand-drawn diagrams. It looked like an evidence board, but it wasn't built to accuse. It was built to remember. At the center was a photograph. Maya Cole. The girl she had seen only once, on a slab, cold and still, eyes closed, as if dreaming something too heavy to finish. Her photo was different here. Smiling, wide-eyed, caught mid-laugh, her hand raised to block the camera, playful, full of life. Under the photo, a handwritten note. She had dreams. Diane's throat tightened. Around the photo were other names. Dennis Caldwell, Brian Tate, Neil Park, each with annotations, badge numbers, assignment histories, internal memos from the night of the raid. Everything Raymond had uncovered, not through force, but diligence, painstaking, deliberate study, like building a case no one asked for, like building a case for a court that didn't exist. On the workbench, she spotted a folder, not locked away, not hidden, just left there, open like a book waiting for a reader. Inside, Maya's application to Spellman, unfinished but beautiful, the kind of essay that made you believe in youth again. There was a letter, too, official, sealed with the university's emblem. She didn't open it. She didn't have to. She set it down gently, careful not to crease the corner, and stepped back. It occurred to her, standing there under that buzzing bulb, that Raymond Cole hadn't left this garage in a hurry. He hadn't abandoned it. He had prepared it. For someone. Maybe her. Maybe anyone willing to see. Diane had been a cop for 23 years. Most of that time she believed in structure, in rules. She'd held the line when others wavered. She played things straight, kept her department clean, or so she thought. But standing in that garage, the weight of those names, those photos, and that single image of a daughter lost to panic and procedure, she realized how much filth had settled beneath the surface. No alarms buzzed, no guilt rose fast enough to stop her hands. She took a Polaroid from the wall, one of Maya and Raymond at a science fair. She held it for a long while, thumb tracing the corner, then returned it exactly where it belonged. Before she left, she looked again at the center photo. The smile, the laugh, the kind of expression that wasn't meant to end in silence. Diane didn't take anything. She didn't call it in. She didn't mention the visit in her notes that week. But that night, she sat alone at her desk long after the station had emptied. She stared at the sealed internal review packet, the one that said the officers had acted within protocol, that no violations were found. She didn't sign it. Instead, she opened a drawer and pulled out a photograph. One someone had slipped onto her desk just days before. No note, just a picture. Maya, in her Spellman sweatshirt, smiling. But this time, the background was different. It wasn't a school photo. It was the mural. Someone had painted her face, large, vibrant, fierce, on the side of the Cedar Falls Community Hall. No one had taken credit. No permits were pulled. The city hadn't ordered it. But there it was, fully rendered, stretching across the brick wall like a reminder too big to ignore. She stared at it, let the silence around her stretch out, then turned off her desk lamp. The garage had shown her something, not how to fix it, but how to finally see. The rain came steady, a southern kind of rain, soft at first, then endless. It slid down the windshield in long, lazy streaks as Raymond sat inside the borrowed sedan, engine off, radio silent. Across the street, beneath the dim yellow light of an old diner sign, Lieutenant Dennis Caldwell leaned against a brick wall, smoking like a man who didn't want to go home. Raymond watched. Caldwell hadn't changed much, still broad-shouldered, still carried that arrogant lean in his spine, the kind that came from years of telling people where to stand, when to talk, when to shut up. That night, the night of the raid, Caldwell had been the one giving orders through a crackling radio, the one who confirmed movement inside before the door even swung open. Now he was alone, lit by neon buzz and regret he hadn't named yet. Raymond opened the door, stepped out into the wet, and crossed the street. Caldwell looked up as he approached. His hand twitched toward his waistband. Not quite fear, just habit. "Lieutenant Caldwell," Raymond said, voice level, soft. "You with the department?" Caldwell asked, squinting through the rain. "No," Raymond said. "I'm the man whose daughter you killed." Silence fell between them like a dropped weight. Caldwell stood straighter. "I didn't pull the trigger." "You didn't have to." Raymond reached into his coat and pulled out a small portable recorder. No weapon, just a square of metal and memory. He pressed play. The audio came thin and warbled under the rain. A girl's voice, soft, nervous. "This is Maya Cole. I think there's someone outside my house. My dad's asleep. Can you send someone to check? It's probably nothing, but I'm scared." Then the dispatcher's voice, then the mix-up, wrong address, wrong house. Raymond hit pause. Caldwell had turned pale. Not from fear. From the knowledge that the voice he'd never heard was now stuck in his ears. "You gave the green light before anyone checked," Raymond said. "You signed off on entry without verifying the address. You cleared men with loaded rifles into my house." "It was protocol." "No," Raymond interrupted. "It was careless, and she's dead." Caldwell opened his mouth, then closed it again. The cigarette in his hand burned down to the filter. He dropped it, ground it under his boot. "I'm not here to threaten you," Raymond said. "I'm not going to hurt you. That's not what this is." "Then what is it?" Raymond stepped closer, his voice low, almost tender. "I just want you to remember her name, every night, every time you fill out a form, every time you look in the mirror and see a man who once thought procedure mattered more than people. Her name is Maya. Say it." Caldwell didn't move. Raymond didn't push. He turned and walked back into the rain. The next name in the notebook was the one that kept him up the longest. Officer Brian Tate, the man who pulled the trigger. Raymond tracked him for 2 weeks, learned his schedule, where he lived, when he picked up his daughter from daycare, what church he stopped at on Wednesdays, sitting in the back, head bowed low. Raymond didn't believe in God, but something about seeing Tate pray stirred something strange inside him. Guilt or habit? Raymond didn't confront him in the street. He waited. One Tuesday morning, just past 7, Tate walked into a laundromat on Glenwood and took his usual seat by the dryer furthest from the windows. Raymond sat across from him. Tate looked up, frowned, then blinked. "You're—" he started. "Yes." Tate swallowed hard. "I didn't know she was— I thought she had a weapon. She had a book. I saw something shiny. We were told it was a hostage situation. I didn't know—" "You didn't ask." Raymond pulled a folded photo from his pocket. Maya, standing in front of a mural. Her mural. The one the city still hadn't painted over. He laid it on the table between them. "I want you to take this," Raymond said. "I want you to carry it with you, every day. I want you to show it to your daughter when she's old enough to ask what you did for a living. I want you to say her name out loud when you lace up your boots." Tate didn't speak. Raymond stood. He turned to leave, then paused. "You don't get forgiveness. You get memory." The door jingled as he stepped out into the morning light. By noon, word had spread. No one said Raymond's name, but they knew. 2 more officers shaken, not injured. 2 more lives touched by something quieter than revenge. He wasn't a killer. He was a mirror. Diane Mercer found another note on her desk that night. It said only, "Justice that doesn't change behavior isn't justice, it's silence." She read it 3 times before locking it in her drawer. And across town, in a diner with cracked red booths and strong coffee, Raymond opened his notebook. He crossed out 2 more names, 3 down, 1 to go. They never found him. Not really. There were reports, sure, blurry security footage, a license plate that led nowhere, stories told in hushed tones by people who swore they saw a man with tired eyes and a gray hoodie near the city bus depot. But by the time any lead reached a desk, it had already grown cold. Cedar Falls moved on, as towns do, as systems are designed to, but something remained. Not loud, not obvious, just present. A new mural appeared downtown, this one on the brick wall of the community library. It wasn't sanctioned. No artist came forward. But there she was, Maya Cole, rendered in sweeping brushstrokes, her face turned upward, eyes full of things that never had the chance to happen. Above her, in plain script, she had dreams. No one painted over it. Each week, a man came to stand beneath it. Henry. He never brought flowers, never cried, just stood there, hand resting on the bricks like he was waiting for them to speak. Sometimes he brought a folding chair and sat, eyes closed. Once, a little boy wandered past and asked who the girl was. Henry didn't answer at first. Then he said she mattered. That seemed to be enough. At City Hall, Diane Mercer signed the final paperwork to step down as chief of police. She declined interviews, made no public statement. Her replacement, younger and sharper in his suit, gave a press conference promising renewed transparency and accountability. The words landed like ash. In her final week, Mercer opened a box that had been left at her office door. No name, just tape across the top. Inside was a single page from a notebook, 1 sentence written in tight, deliberate print. Justice doesn't always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it walks in silence. She folded it gently and kept it. At Spelman College, a group of students created a scholarship in Maya's name. No national coverage, no viral campaign. Just a quiet fund given each year to a black girl from a small town who wrote essays about systems, about truth, about wanting to make something better. The first recipient cried when she read Maya's words. She printed them out and taped them above her desk. Sometimes, at the bus stop on 3rd and Maple, an old driver swore he saw someone who looked like Raymond. Quiet man. Sat in the back. Got off near the outskirts. One night, the driver returned to find a photo left on the seat. Maya wearing her Spelman hoodie. On the back, a line in blocky print. I never stopped being her father. No one else saw him, but people remembered. Not out of fear, not from violence, but from weight, the kind that doesn't fade when the headlines do. the kind that sinks into a place and stays there, stubborn and sacred. The system never indicted anyone. No badges were stripped. No courtrooms held apologies. But in locker rooms, in classrooms, in coffee shops across Cedar Falls, the name Maya Cole was spoken with a kind of reverence usually reserved for saints or sisters. She had become a memory that wouldn't be buried, a mirror too bright to ignore. And Raymond? He was never caught. Because no one was really looking. Not anymore. Because maybe, just maybe, the town knew deep down that what he carried had never been a weapon. It had always been a name. There are stories that don't end with a trial or a headline or even an apology. Some end in silence, in a mural painted overnight, in a folded photo left on a bus seat, or in the stillness of a garage filled with names only one man remembered. And yet, that silence speaks. Raymond Cole never raised his voice. He never asked for the world to look at him. But in the quiet way he walked through loss, how he faced the ones who took so much from him and gave back only memory, he reminded us of something we tend to forget. Justice isn't always a verdict. Sometimes it's a weight we carry so others won't have to. For the Black community, stories like Maya's are not unfamiliar. Names become hashtags, moments become movements, and grief gets folded into survival. But Raymond's journey wasn't about revenge. It was about making sure the next child had a chance to grow up with their dreams intact. He didn't demand respect. He gave it first. And through that grace, he changed more than he punished. The heart of this story is simple, but not easy. Never judge a person by what they wear, where they come from, or how quietly they stand. Because sometimes truth and dignity come from places we were taught to overlook, especially from the Black community, where strength has too often been mistaken for threat, and gentleness mistaken for weakness. Raymond wasn't a hero because he fought back. He was one because he held on. There's a line from the story that may linger. You don't get forgiveness, you get memory. That memory lives not only in murals or notebooks, but in the choices we make each day. To see people fully, to pause before we act, to ask a name, not assume a story. Like a porch light left on in a quiet night, a single kind act can guide us through life's darkest corners. So take a moment. Sit with this story. Think of someone you have overlooked, someone who might be carrying more than they show. And if this story touched something in you, consider passing that warmth on to someone else. The Black community carries enough weight. Maybe now we can carry it together.